Hello, and welcome to 5 Minutes with your host, Sophie Ferrari. Today we have a special guest with us, Samuel Adams. So, Samuel, tell me about yourself.
Well, my name is Samuel Adams. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm 81 years old. I'm an American statesman, political philosopher, and one of the founding fathers of the United States.
So, what was your opinion on the British and the first Inequitable Law Act, the Stamp Act?
I thought it was unjust and not necessary whatsoever. The British had it coming when we harassed the stamp distributors, boycotted British goods, and prepared a declaration of rights and grievances.
But do you understand why the British wanted the Stamp Act?
I understand that they would benefit from exacting out revenue from taxing our basic necessities.
What finally got the Stamp Act repealed?
Well, delegates from 9 colonies formed the Stamp Act Congress, whom issued the Declaration of Rights and Grievances, stating that the colonists were not well represented, so Parliament couldn't impose on taxes on the colonies.
So after the Stamp Act was removed, the Townshend Acts were placed for Britain to gain money another way with revenue laws. Now there were taxes on colonial imports and stationed troops at major colonial ports to protect customs officers. How do you feel about this?
I was mortified. We protested taxation without representation and organized a new boycott of imported goods.
What kind of impact did your boycott have?
Many wealthy women stopped buying British luxuries, which evidently put the businesses in debt, as well as the housewives also boycotted the British tea.
What are your opinions on redcoats?
Well, in June of 1768, British agents in Boston captured a local merchant, John Hancock's ship, the Liberty. It was claimed that Hancock smuggled in a shipment of wine from Madeira and had failed to pay the customs taxes. This caused several riots against customs agents. In retaliation, the British stationed 2,000 of redcoats. Their presence gave the air hostility. This was our land, and they came and thought that they could simply just boss us around.
How would you retaliate against the redcoats?
Well, on a specific afternoon in March of 1770, a fistfight broke out over jobs between the British soldiers and the colonists. That evening, a mob gathered in front of the customs house and taunted the guards, and soon after, the guards killed 3 men and fatally wounding 2 more. Other colonial agitators and I labeled this confrontation the Boston Massacre.
How did you feel about that situation?
I thought that the fact that the guards could follow through with such a harsh act of violence towards us colonists really pushed us over the edge.
So moving forward, let's talk a little bit about what happened 3 years later.
In the year of 1773 was the Tea Act. The British East India Company was affected poorly by the boycotts, nearly reaching bankruptcy. To save the company, the act was devised so that we could purchase tea free of taxes.
So wasn't that enough? That you finally got a piece of freedom?
Honestly, no. It just motivated us to continue with our violence and our protesting. As for December 18th, we poured 18,000 pounds of tea off of 3 British tea ships and into the harbor, and that was called the Boston Tea Party.
So, what was the effect of this act of rebellion?
King George III was extremely angered by the destruction of British property, so much so that he had Parliament pass the Intolerable Acts. One act shut down Boston Harbor because we refused to pay for the damaged tea. The Quartering Act authorized British commanders to house soldiers in vacant private homes as well as other buildings. In an attempt to keep the peace, the new governor of Massachusetts placed Boston under martial law rule imposed by military forces.
What did you do in response?
The Committee of Correspondence assembled the First Continental Congress, where 56 delegates met in Philadelphia and drew up a Declaration of Colonial Rights.
What did the Declaration do?
They defended colonies' rights to run their own affairs, and they supported the protest in Massachusetts, stating that if the British used force against the colonies have the right to fight back. They also agreed to reconvene in May 1775 if our demands weren't met.
So, who were the Minutemen?
The Minutemen were the civilian soldiers that began to stockpile firearms and gunpowder secretly.
Did General Gage know about the Minutemen and their plan?
He did eventually find out, and he prepared to strike back.
What was the plan of the Minutemen, and what did General Gage do about it?
Their plan was to surprise attack the British with large amounts of arms and ammunition that they kept outside of Boston. Gage sent agents toward Concord, and the agents returned with maps showing where the supplies to go against the British were being stored. He then planned to march along Lexington Road to Concord, where they would seize and destroy all munitions that they could find.
So, where were you when all this was happening?
Well, John Hancock and I were staying in Lexington, which is a smaller community about 5 miles east of Concord. And as rumors were flying about the British invading, Hancock and I were in hiding, so our rules of leadership were taken over by Joseph Warren. Joseph found out how the rumors of the British will soon be attacking, so he sent Paul Revere, a member of the Sons of the Liberty, and told him to warn myself and Hancock, as well as the townspeople along the way.
So, what was the glorious day for America?
The King's troops reached Lexington, and when they got there, 70 Minutemen were waiting for them in lines on the village green. The commander ordered the Minutemen to leave, and the colonists began to move out without laying down their musket. Someone fired, and the British soldiers sent a volley of shots into the departing militia. 8 Minutemen died and 10 were wounded, while only 1 British soldier was injured. The battle ended up lasting only 15 minutes. As the British marched onto Concord, they found an empty arsenal, so they lined up to march back to Boston. Between 3,000 and 4,000 Minutemen had assembled by now, and they fired on the marching troops from behind stone walls and trees. British soldiers fell down by dozens, while the others made their way back to Boston.
So, again, where were you when all this took place?
Well, we had fled back to the backwoods when we first heard about how the British were coming, but as the Battle of Lexington occurred, we fled deeper into the New England countryside. It was a fine day, very pleasant. I mean, it was the glorious day for America.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Samuel. Well, it was great to speak with you, and I feel as though you have taught me a lot in the limited time that we had together. So thank you again for taking the time to talk to me.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Sophie.
Samuel Adams, everybody!